If you're one of the 1.5 million people who've been laid off, furloughed, downsized, or fired this year so far, you may be grieving. In this video, I'm going to explain what career grief actually is and how to properly mourn it so you can start feeling lighter, clear, and more hopeful. Because I really don't want you to feel stuck and powerless when there are steps that you can take. Hi, I'm Laverne McKinnon, and welcome to the Moonshot Mentor community. I'm a career strategist and a grief coach, and I love to help ambitious professionals grow their careers and navigate the harder parts of the journey, like professional heartbreaks and setbacks that don't always get talked about. My work weaves together the spiritual, the strategic, and the tactical so you can build a career that's fulfilling and uniquely yours. If you enjoy this video, please do remember to subscribe to my channel for weekly videos covering all kinds of career moves. The call came on a Monday morning. I was still in bed, but when I saw that it was my boss, I jumped up and I cleared my throat a few times and I did my best to sound normal while saying, "Hello." It came out froggy and weak sauce. I knew why she was calling. I'd been waiting for months to get the official notice of my firing. She sounded like she was reading from a script. Later that week, boxes arrived from the office, my daughter's photo in a freshly chipped frame, a half-full bottle of McKinnon's, a mug with lettering that said, "Everybody's watching." It was both anticlimactic and gut-wrenching. I spent the next several months in my bedroom cave, alternating between shame, humiliation, panic, depression, and intense self-loathing. For the first time in 10 years, really since I'd been with that company, there were no meetings to prep for, emails to craft with precision and diplomacy, or crises to be solved in a blink of an eye. So very, very strange to have been stressed out and sort of resentful of all that activity, and then to wish with every fiber of my being that I could have it all back. At the time, I didn't know what I was feeling. I was pretty sure that I was broken because everything I did to feel better was a big, fat turd ball. I took antidepressants, went to therapy, and worked with a life coach. I read books about igniting my passion, the art of letting go, and practicing gratitude. I went to Esalen, a holistic education center. I worked with psychics and intuitives, and I got a certification in Excel. Nothing worked, no matter how great of a student I was, because the books, workshops, readings, classes, and teachings were missing a key element of my experience. What I didn't know then, that I know now, is that I was grieving. Turns out, grief isn't just for funerals. It shows up anytime something meaningful ends. When a relationship fractures, when a home is lost, when a dream slips out of reach. But the kind of grief that comes from losing your place in the working world, most people don't get it. And that's because career grief is what bereavement experts call disenfranchised grief. It's a form of loss that society doesn't officially acknowledge or validate. Instead, you get advice disguised as comfort. You'll land on your feet. It's probably for the best. Everything happens for a reason. And at the same time, if you're anything like me, you start to question yourself. Why can't I just move on? Why does it still hurt? Why does everything, even sending a text message, feel harder than it used to be? You may wonder if you're overreacting. Well, you're not. What you're feeling is a normal human response to loss. Grief doesn't mean you're broken. It means something that you are deeply attached to is gone, and you have permission to grieve career losses. Now, once I tell people that, the next question usually comes so fast. So how do I get over it? Getting over grief is one of several myths that cause harm. The world teaches us to treat grief like a bad cold. Take a few days off, drink lots of water, and pop a few aspirin if your head hurts. Grief is not an experience you get over. Grief is an experience that gets integrated into your life. At the same time, that gaping hole in your torso, it cannot simply be filled with an alternate job. Consider what happens when a tornado hits a town. Buildings collapse, trees uproot, familiar streets vanish. The landscape of the community is forever changed. Even when the debris is cleared and the new structures are constructed, It's not the same town, it's a rebuilt one. Grief works in a kind of similar way. When something you are deeply attached to is gone, it alters your internal landscape. You may rebuild, even thrive again, but you'll always remember what once stood there, the job, the sense of belonging, the dream. Then there's the 5 stages of grief myth. You might have heard of them: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. They've been printed on posters, used in workshops, and turned into a cultural script for how we should grieve. But those stages weren't meant to be linear or even universal. Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she designed these stages to describe how terminally ill patients process their own mortality, not how the rest of us should manage loss. And so somehow we turned that amazing research that she did into a rule book. And when we did that, we then gave ourselves a new way to fail. If you have emotions outside of the 5 stages framework, you're not doing grief wrong. Your range of emotions is completely normal. Another myth: if I stay busy, I won't have to feel this. That one's especially common in ambitious people. Productivity can numb pain for a while. It gives the illusion of control. But grief has a way of leaking through the cracks and can show up as distraction, burnout, cynicism, the loss of motivation, and overall grumpiness. One of the most common myths is a close cousin to getting over grief, and that's the belief that time heals all. Let's debunk that from 2 perspectives. First, the word heals implies that grief is an illness to recover from, something that can be cured. It's not. Grief is a transformative experience that changes how you see yourself and the world around you. Time by itself doesn't heal, but it does create space. So over time, your relationship to what was lost shifts and the pain softens with distance. I really do wish that grief came with a timeline, but it doesn't. What time can offer is room to integrate the loss, to make it part of your story rather than the whole story. What I've learned, both personally and through years of coaching, is that grief doesn't obey rules, but it does respond to tasks. Tasks are not formulas or stages. They're simple human actions that help you acknowledge what's changed and make sense of it. The framework I use to describe those tasks is called RISE, because that's what we're learning to do after loss. Rise through understanding, rise through intention, rise through agency. The framework offers a different way forward. Each task builds on the one before it, but you don't have to move in order. Think of RISE as a loop, not a ladder. You can circle back as often as you need to. So R stands for recognize the loss. This is the first task of grief. It's the recognition, acknowledging what's actually gone. It sounds simple, but most people skip it entirely. They rush to update their resumes, reach out to contacts, or start applying for jobs, believing that momentum is going to ease the pain. But you can't rebuild on ground that you haven't cleared. Recognition starts by naming the visible and hidden losses. The visible losses are easier to point to: the title, the office, the daily structure. These are the losses that are more readily replaced, but don't reflect the entire picture. Beneath it are the hidden losses. These are the ones that may take time to name, but you feel them intensely. For example, the loss of belonging, the loss of confidence, the loss of purpose, the loss of belief. When I was fired, it wasn't just the loss of my title that gutted me. It was the loss of identity. For years, I had seen myself as smart, strategic, and capable. When the parting of the ways call came, all of that vanished in an instant. My identity shifted from someone accomplished to being a loser and an idiot. And that became my secret and my shame. I didn't tell anyone how small I felt or how humiliated I was. I poured all of that emotion into self-criticism instead. It wasn't until I learned to name the losses, especially the hidden ones, that I could start to get a clearer view of how to rebuild. Here's the thing. When I was telling myself that I was a loser and an idiot, I was creating meaning about something that happened that didn't make sense to me. Why do we do that to ourselves? It's because the brain can't tolerate not knowing, so it rushes to fill in the blanks. So each time it lands on an explanation, whether it's accurate or not, it releases a small hit of dopamine. And dopamine is a hormone that rewards us for solving a problem. So it feels good for a moment, but the comfort doesn't mean that the meaning is true. That's why the I in Rise invites you to investigate the meaning you've created from your loss, because that meaning will shape what comes next. What came next for me was that I avoided opportunities that scared me. I downplayed my experience. I stayed small because I worried that I'd get my head chopped off again. After all, I was a loser. Investigating the meaning you've created doesn't mean forcing positivity or rewriting history. It means pausing long enough to get curious about what you've been telling yourself about the loss, asking whether it's true or whether it's just the brain hardwired to come up with answers. That's why this step matters. It helps you question the meaning before it hardens into identity. Here's a hard truth. Grief isn't only about what happened. It's about what you believe it means. When a career disruption occurs, we're often left in uncertainty and no answers. So our brain jumps in and creates any old meaning regardless of whether it's hurtful or helpful. Hurtful meaning sounds like, I suck, I'm not good enough, I'll never recover from this. Helpful meanings sound like, my work mattered, even if the position ended. I served with integrity and skill, and those strengths don't disappear. This change says more about the system than about my value. For me, I realized that calling myself a loser and an idiot was not only harmful, it was inaccurate. And looking at the facts, it was tough to ignore that I went on to several high-profile gigs after I lost that one job. Now, those people, they weren't hiring me because I was a loser and an idiot. They were hiring me because of my talent, experience, and being a good cultural fit. So to complete this task, you create a new meaning based on the truth. My truth and new meaning? I was no longer a fit for the job that fired me, and the universe tough loved me so I could realign and honor my values and my purpose. Once you have a helpful meaning in place, even if it feels tender, it's time to signal the shift from what was to what's next. That's the S in the RISE framework. Neuroscientist and grief researcher Mary Frances O'Connor, she's the author of The Grieving Brain. She writes that our brains form attachment maps to the people, places, and roles that make us feel safe. These maps help us navigate our world. So when something that we're attached to disappears, a job, a community, a dream, our brain does not immediately understand that it's gone. It keeps looking for it. It's trying to reconcile a world that no longer fits the old map. So that's why ritual becomes a powerful tool. Rituals teach the brain that something that has ended is no longer there. So rituals signal both physically and emotionally that it's time to redraw the map. In Western culture, we're familiar with rituals for death, funerals, memorials, anniversaries, but we rarely create them for professional endings. When a job ends, a dream collapses, or a role is taken away, there isn't a ceremony, and there's rarely a chance to have a good goodbye. Career grief rituals help retrain the brain and calm the heart. They confirm at every level that's what ended is real and that you're ready to begin again. Rituals give shape to what otherwise feels shapeless. We can do this in many different ways. It can be writing a letter to the job you've lost. It can be lighting a candle. It can be bearing a symbol of what's ending or taking a long mindful walk to reflect. Rituals externalize what's been internal, and they tell the brain this chapter has closed. Once the brain understands that, the heart can begin to follow. I encourage you to create a bespoke ritual, like my client Rebecca did. She took the pay stubs that she'd been keeping from 13 years at the same job, and she origamied them into a bird. The process was methodical and deliberate. It was also meditative, and it allowed her to intentionally say goodbye, to have a good goodbye, to the job that she'd once seen as safe and secure. Those repurposed check stubs became an invitation for her to take flight. Now, your ritual doesn't need to be public or elaborate. It just needs to mean something to you. The goal isn't to erase what happened, it's to honor it, mark it, and make space for whatever comes next. When you consciously signal the shift, you begin to reclaim your agency. You stop being the person something happened to and start being the person choosing how to carry it forward. Once your brain understands what's ended, it's time to move towards the E in the RISE framework, embarking on what's next. So this is space opening for something new to rise. You might feel a little more spring in your step, a hint of excitement to reach out to an acquaintance or readiness to take a class that you've been intrigued by. You're like that little green plant sprouting out of a cement wall or a cement sidewalk. You are unstoppable. So this final step in the framework is to take one small step forward. Agency. This is what's all about choice, your choice. Now, agency doesn't mean having control over the outcomes. It means remembering that you have a say in what comes next. Maybe that looks like getting a haircut, reaching out to an old colleague, starting a new morning routine. Maybe it's giving yourself permission to rest. As you begin to act, your brain starts mapping new attachments, new routines, new communities, new ways of being. And that's how integration happens. The brain learns safety again through experience. So when I began coaching, it wasn't part of a grand plan. It was a teeny tiny step, a way to use what I learned from my own heartbreak to help others. I didn't know it then, but that was my version of embarking. In moving through the RISE framework, you integrate your loss into your life. The grief becomes part of your landscape, but it no longer defines you. You carry it differently, and in that carrying, you rise. 19 years after that Monday morning phone call, I can still feel how scared I was to hear the words that my job was over. And at the same time, relief that I knew what was coming had finally arrived. It took me a decade, though, to recognize that my loss was legitimate, that the grief that I was feeling had permission, which is what drives me to share my story with you today. I don't want anyone else to ever believe that they are less than due to a career loss. There's no expeditious way through this, no timeline, no formula, no 5 stages to check off. But there is the RISE framework, tasks, not rules. And with every act of recognition, every honest reflection, every small ritual, and every brave step forward, you are moving closer to a version of yourself that carries both loss and endless possibility. Okay, that's it for today. But before you go, I want you to know that you do not have to go through this alone. If you want more support to stay motivated, to feel less alone, and move through your career transition with strategy and lots of love, come join my Substack community. Paid members get exclusive journal prompts, guided meditations, live workshops, and a community of ambitious, purpose-driven professionals. You can sign up for free or become a paid subscriber at moonshotmentor.substack.com. A very big thank you to Amanda Kenny for all of the social media expertise and editing, and for Lauren Deacon for being an incredible organizational and research genius. I would be lost without both of them. A very, very, very big thank you, for your consistency, for showing up, for being here with me. Until next time, keep going after your moonshot.